Howdy, Hoedown! That was meant to be loud. So, before I get started, I would like to take a poll. So how many of you guys have heard of Adhearsion before you went to the website? The Hoedown website, that is. Okay, so a lot of people still unfamiliar with it. Has anyone here done Asterisk development in the past? Ooh, some people. That's actually very rare in the Ruby scene. Any Ruby in Asterisk? Like with Raggy from 2005? And, no? Oh, I see. Okay, so a fresh audience, good. How many of you have seen me talk in the past? One. Cool. You know, there's someone's business cards up here I can give you. That's all, I'm sorry. So I talked about my framework Adhearsion, but before I jump into Adhearsion, I'd like to talk about VoIP. And I'd like to do that by example. And this is Otto. He's a VoIP newbie, and he's you guys. So he's a developer. You know, he's a computer geek. He's intelligent. He has that strong hacker curiosity. He's a problem solver, and he's probably single. So because of his, copious free time and, not being spent dating and so forth, or not winning any dates, I guess, and because of his strong hacker curiosity, he finds a VoIP. So he goes online and looks at, open source solutions for VoIP and finds that Asterisk is the biggest one. And how many of you have not heard of Asterisk, by the way? Okay. So really fresh audience. So to back up a little bit, Asterisk is software that lets you control phones, basically. So it can do that either by interfacing with hardware that basically plugs into your wall, or it can do that pure VoIP to VoIP using open standards, basically. So when Otto found Asterisk, he found a community full of basically other voice over IP hackers that did a lot of cool things. There's, text-to-speech is really big, so you can aggregate content from the web, basically speak it out to you wherever you are using your mobile phone, something that you have with you everywhere. You can use your phone, again, something that you have with you constantly as a universal remote, or say your door locks, or your media center with like Xbox Media Center for people tagged Xboxes, or Myth TV or something like that. And just numerous other interesting projects. So he downloads the GPL book. O'Reilly has, Asterisk, the future telephony that's GPL'd, and it's a great starting resource, and he follows it and gets up and running and hits a few snags. This is pretty common in the voice over IP industry. There's a lot of jargon. It's completely unlike web development. So he gets past the snags. Yeah. He gets past the snags and finally does make his first phone call. And it's, the quintessential Hello World application. Asterisk comes with like 1,300 sound files that were all recorded by this professional voice actress named Allison. And some of them are just ordinary like voicemail things and standard business, text that you would hear calling. In fact, you probably heard it all calling to singular or something. And the really fun ones are things like Hello World and all your bays are belong to us, and you sound cute. There's a lot of like really suggestive things in there. And he falls in love with Allison. But it's not necessarily a love with Allison. It's perhaps a love with just that ability to control a phone, which is something that most people never do in their entire life, even programmers. Voice over IP is that especially open source voice over IP, is that opening that lets us interface with the things we have in our pockets with us, basically our entire lives now. So it's exciting and it's fun, and it's one of the reasons why I really like voice over IP. So his love jumps away from him when he starts getting into a real project and his boss intervenes. Because real voice over IP projects totally suck. They totally suck. And by voice over IP, I mean Asterisk. I'm talking about, no one does it right. No one. But Asterisk especially. A big competitor to Asterisk is FreeSwitch. And it's the new kid on the block. I spent all last month working with a FreeSwitch project, actually implementing FreeSwitch bindings for Adhearsion. And the core developers of it literally told me that I was charting, unseen waters in my attempts to build, an abstraction around it. And I found a lot of big problems with it. And they're still in the pre-beta phase. And they're not willing to change anything. So it's a doomed industry. I assure you, I'll show you a demo soon of what it really looks like. So he sees how bad they suck. So I'd like to show you what a dial plan looks like in Asterisk. And whenever I talk, especially to Rubyists, no matter how many swear words I use or, how much I scream, they say, okay, I get it. Asterisk development sucks. Yeah, I've seen things that suck. But no, you don't get it. It really sucks. So this is oh, you can't see that. So this is basically what I'm about to show you is a dial plan from Asterisk that will just print out slowly, so you can just sort of scan it. You don't have to try to derive any meaning from it. You don't have to read anything, so guys in the back, don't worry, you're not missing anything. Just sort of scan it and let your, programming aesthetic senses fire. Okay. This is a dial plan. Notice the go-tos. It's one way. And this is real. This is just someone's Office PBX stuff. I've worked in projects where it was worse than this. This is about 1,000 lines. I worked in ones that were over 2,000. And this is very typical. It's almost done. Someone had to write all this too, and debug it, and all that fun stuff. Yeah. Well, it could be dried up, right? So that's it. That's something that you'll never have to deal with. And rejoice. So So what does this mean? The thing I just showed you, the dial plan, is one sort of section of the voice over IP industry. It's, the thing that we deal with most, but there are many other aspects of it that are also involved in our, at least a voice over IP engineer's daily work, tying in micro browsers on the phone or trying to get interoperability between different systems and integrating with other collaboration technologies or databases. So all of these things are completely unaccounted for and done as hacks, and Asterisk developers readily admit that. I don't think that any Asterisk developer would disagree that Otto's experiences were typical. And if they did disagree, they would say that it's typical for people not even to make the first phone call. So what does that mean? It means they're really big problems. So these are a few sections that I've pointed out where Asterisk fails and that extensions grammar that I just showed you fails. As Rubyists, we look at this and we just I mean, this is something that every reasonably high-level programmer looks at and, deals with every day. It's common because the rest of the software industry has moved beyond that, 30 years ago. So the development mentality, basically, for extensions.conf, which is what I just showed you, by the way, is the same of that of, say, BASIC or assembler. Just one instruction per line, a lot of go-tos, and there's not much, optimization. So I invented adhesion. So adhesion is basically a framework for improving voice over IP functionality. All these different aspects that I mentioned in the voice over IP industry, or really in the communication industry, can be easily adhered. This is where adhesion gets its name from, adhesion that you can hear. So using Ruby and using the sort of mentality that I derived from Rails, I put this together. It's not Rails, I should stress. It's an entirely different meta-programming framework. It shares active support and active record, even though active record is optional. So it's its own framework. And a lot of people come to me and ask me really strange Rails questions. And I just have to reiterate that it's not Rails. It's not Rails. So this is what an adhesion dial plan looks like. So even in the old grammar that I showed you, things are separated into contexts. So here there's the internal context that has a curly brace. That's really method missing and, it gets a block, but you don't have to know that. And what's within the curly brace is basically the implementation of that context. So case extension is is basically a variable that Asterisk passes adhesion for every call, and adhesion metadefs a bunch of variables for you to use to make it easier. And here, I use a couple examples of pattern matching in Ruby, especially in the case statement, which is phenomenal. The ranges apply very, very well to telecom because you're always dealing with numbers because that's all a phone can input. Dial SIP/extension. SIP is basically a protocol. It's an open standards protocol for voice over IP. So whenever, a voice over IP desk phone calls another voice over IP desk phone, it's usually going over SIP. So SIP/extension dials basically that extension. And there are other protocols, and that's why SIP is kind of there. In fact, SIP is the default, so you can leave that out. Join extension is basically an abstraction of joining a conference. So the number you provide there, extension, would drop you into a conference, basically. And anyone on an internal, phone network that dials, say, 7020 would be talking to each other with basically one line of code. So this next line, the win underscore and this funny stuff, is an asterisk pattern. So you may recognize that, the people sitting up close, from that old file that I showed you. It's actually a pretty concise way of representing phone numbers. It just has a lot of limitations. And in asterisk, it's the only way to represent numbers. So here you have a choice. In asterisk, patterns are prepended by an underscore. And fortunately, Ruby allows an underscore method. So you basically pass it a string, and it sort of compiles that down into a Ruby regular expression and returns it to the win. Time, it was one of the bullet points that I just showed you, but time handling in a dial plan is something that extensions.conf does really poorly, and with Ruby, especially with active support, it's beautiful. 3.days.from now. Major kudos to the Rails guys for that. I totally love it. And there are other pleasant things you get from active support. So speak is a abstraction of the text-to-speech functions in asterisk. Testing. Okay. Basically, this says some text, right? This could be text from a database. Here it's just used to, cleanly notify the person that they called outside of the business hours in Germany. So just don't let them waste their time waiting on the phone, basically, while it's ringing. This is the second half of that same dial plan. Adhearsion defines a couple constants for you that you would probably be using. So whenever they dial a U.S. number, then we'll go over the United States trunk. A trunk is basically some service provider that you send your calls to. It terminates to landline phones. So here, we're using a specific trunk for U.S. numbers because a lot of providers offer different rates. So some do, say, domestic calling cheaper, and then international calling, more expensive, and then just their margins, level out. And some do, cheaper international calls, but their domestics are really high. So you do least cost routing just based on pattern matching. It's that simple, and you can save a lot of money that way. Not to mention saving money by using VoIP, because it's ridiculously cheap. You can use regular expressions. This is all just like normal Ruby that we're all, used to seeing every day. But to a telecom guy, this is really powerful because a lot of the telephony applications that people write can be explained in just a couple of sentences. And it's never so complex that it requires something like what you just saw. It's never that complex. And if all the other patterns failed, then you can play a series of sound files. So here, the %W array literal in Ruby makes for a really beautiful way of expressing a series of sound files. These are files that Asterisk comes standard with. The You Sound Cute was one of them, and Hello World and so forth. So the end result is something with no extraneous quotes and no commas, and it's even readable to, I dare say, an accountant or a janitor or something. People with no technical expertise, but given the context of telephones, could probably derive the meaning of it. So this is an example of database-driven dial plans, which basically doesn't exist in Asterisk. I mean, if you really want to drive your dial plan with a database, most people tell you just forget it. It's really not doable. You usually have to execute like a system command and pass it arguments that, establish a connection and then, do some SQL and then return something. Assuming that you could do something with return values, which you can't. So here it's basically keeping accounts, and caller ID is one of the variables that Adhearsion creates for you. So it goes to the database, finding the caller ID, or rather the account matching that caller ID, and does some logic based on their usage. So if their usage is beyond 100 hours, then execute the beyond limit context. And this neat little syntax, the plus beyond limit, is basically a way of executing another context in your dial plan. So when this evaluates as false, here it's basically taking time, which calculates how long it takes that block to execute, and then adds it back to the database and then saves it. And otherwise, whenever beyond limit gets executed, we get another array literal of sound files. But notice how there's a 100 in there. Adhearsion checks for numbers, basically, in the array. And if it finds one, it doesn't execute like the sound file API function. It executes basically what it takes to break that up into several sound files and then play it. Because you couldn't do like 1,234 or something. It wouldn't have a sound file called that. You have to assemble it from other sound files. So the end result is something that's, very readable. So Adhearsion's benefits. It's abstracted and therefore portable. So it's abstracted between computers. So you can actually take this and like bundle it and send it to your friend or put it on the web, and other people can use your software. And code reuse is another thing that just doesn't exist in Asterisk. There's no big community online of people sharing voice over IP applications because there's just no way to really exchange that stuff because it's so monolithic and so convoluted and so illegible. So because it's written with Ruby, it's portable between operating systems, right? Because Ruby's platform independent. And with the new version of Adhearsion 0.80, the one I spent so much working on last month, it's now portable between PBXs. PBX is basically the thing that handles your phone call. So it can use Asterisk or it can use, say, FreeSwitch or any others in the future. There are a couple other standardized APIs that would fit really well with Adhearsion. So Adhearsion is simple. And it's simple in that you can take that existing file plan that I showed you, port it over to Adhearsion syntax is doing the exact same thing, and it's much cleaner. But it's more powerful because you're not limited to just those functions. You can use all of the benefits of a high-level object-oriented programming language with DSLs. So it's very, very powerful. And Ruby applies in many places where the development status quo is really poor, such as Asterisk. So it's extensible. The helper system in Adhearsion lets you write small, basically functions or, any extension to the architecture and exchange it with other people. So, or customize Adhearsion to your needs. Adhearsion has an application structure just like Rails does. So you do and create something, and then you can write helpers for your specific domain or send helpers around to other people. And Adhearsion is readable. And the old, saying goes that code is a read mostly thing. And as someone that used to work for a company maintaining someone else's DAO plan, no one likes to sit in front of that thing and maintain it. And sure, it may be easy to write, but it's a guilty pleasure. So I like to make this analogy. So before Adhearsion, writing this grammar, you have a limited number of tools, right? You have your fingers and you have, well, in this case, you have your fingers and maybe one brush. You have a couple colors. You don't have much skill. And you end up with something like this. It's just mediocre, right, at best. But after Adhearsion, you get something like this. You feel like Bob Ross, happy old Bob Ross. You have as much color as you can hold. You have all kinds of different brushes. You have a ton of skill. You're happy doing what you do. You do things amazingly fast. And it's rewarding, So Adhearsion is not only VoIP. It's more of a collaboration framework, and I really kind of wince when I say that it's something to improve voice over IP development, because it's really collaboration, because voice over IP is a subset of collaboration, right? So this is where it gets its name from, to adhere, people, technologies, and businesses, and that's with, different kinds of interoperability technologies, or, instant messaging, and then Growl or email or something like that, which can all be, done in your DAO plan or, with a scheduling system or something. Adhearsion's internals are open. So it's open source software, and it's Ruby, so you can monkey patch everything. But it's also legible. A big problem with Asterisk is there aren't many code hackers, because people just do not understand the code. You have to be a very competent C programmer, and you have to risk, introducing a segfault, and you have to wonder, okay, was that my code? Okay, we, forked 4 months ago, what do we do now? So Adhearsion, being written in Ruby, allows code to be maintained, basically. And Adhearsion is good for the entire ecosystem. Business managers, the developers, and the users that and the users that enjoy the features Adhearsion brings to market. So, instant messaging integration lets them do, Jabber presence, and then, depending whether they're away, don't route calls there, stuff like that that are actually pretty useful. Managers like it because they spend less money. When I was working, basically, it was my first time going to a client in Silicon Valley. They brought me in and they told me they had 14 projects they wanted me to work on. Things that they had just come up with that they knew I could develop things rapidly because I'm the adhesion guy. So after sort of enumerating them, I asked them, okay, which one do you want the most? And they were like, okay, well, we have this one, yeah, and this is how it works and so forth. And so I turned to my laptop, and within maybe an hour and a half, I had exactly what he asked for and a Rails front end for it. And he was just like, what the hell, right? Because that's something that people charge thousands and thousands of dollars for. And, complain about doing, a web interface, in a database? Wait, you're crazy. That jacks on thousands of dollars. So adhesion really makes managers happy. It makes developers happy. We Rubyists get to remain Rubyists. And because of these many different aspects and how radically different it is from the previous methodology, it really is the next generation of voice over IP development. That's why I titled my talk that. So, getting started. The fundamentals of telephony. I should probably start there. A normal call basically exists with, say, like your POTS line, your plain old telephony service. This is something you buy from Ma Bell, and they plug into your wall, and you just have that analog phone sitting there. And it routes to some, $300,000 Nortel switch that goes over all kinds of, transportation mediums to the other Nortel switch somewhere else, closer to where your callee was, and then goes to their phone. And it's here that these guys make a ton of money. And the Linux, or rather the voice over IP approach, and the Asterisk approach is to use the internet, because internet is dirt cheap compared to that. So you have Asterisk running on Linux, then it goes over the internet, and that's the best way I could represent the internet. I mean, how do you show the internet? And this is just this is pure VoIP to VoIP. And Asterisk can also talk to, say, a plain old telephony service. So you can still use your Ma Bell, bill, basically, and plug it into like a special card that Asterisk can talk to and place phone calls over or receive phone calls. So if you're going to get started with VoIP, you need to download Asterisk. You have to download Linux as well, because Asterisk is pretty tightly coupled with Linux. So there's one solution that does this really well. It's called Asterisk Now. It's supported by Digium, the company that makes Asterisk. And it's just a distro based on Red Hat that comes with Asterisk pre-installed, and you can run it in a VM. So on the website, they have like a Zen image and a VMware image, or a live CD or an install CD. And you just download one of those, whatever. I use the VMware Fusion on here, and I have this little PBX with me wherever I go, regardless of internet. And it comes, by the way, after I pull their leg, they include Ruby gems and Ruby with it, too. And soon Adhearsion, they offered to put Adhearsion in there, but I don't have time to write all the recipe RPMs and stuff. So if anyone would want to really, really contribute to Adhearsion, that's the best way to do it, is to write, the recipes that maybe take like a day, and then just send it off to Digium, and then it'll be included by default with Asterisk Now, and the instructions for getting Adhearsion ease would be a lot simpler because it's already done. So Adhearsion is a gem, just like most software in the Ruby scene. Gem install Adhearsion. The code it takes, the line it takes to hook Asterisk up with Adhearsion, basically catches all patterns and goes off to an IP. That IP is whatever you want. AGI is the Asterisk gateway interface. It's the protocol. So with Adhearsion installed, read. I wrote for the next version of the Asterisk code, Asterisk Future Telephony 2nd edition, and I wrote a section for Linux Journal Magazine in March. So those are both freely available online. O'Reilly published an extended excerpt of my section in the book, and Linux Journal is great about things they publish. They basically put everything on the web after the month that it aired or ran. And Emerging Telephony is the blog that carries the Asterisk section I wrote. And participate. There's a mailing list with over 100 people in it. I encourage you to go, and once you get up and running with Adhearsion, ask questions, because you'll definitely have some. Documentation, I try to do my job, and write documentation, but some things are not there. I apologize, so ask me a question, or contribute to the documentation maybe. So I'd like to sort of talk about the new adhearsion.com. It's basically a Rails app I've been working on in conjunction with another developer for exchanging voice over IP applications. So Adhearsion is really the first framework to ever come out in the voice over IP industry where you can actually trade this code. So I'm trying to build a community around that so people can, say, build a call center and then stick it online, and other people can use that. And we reduce this ghastly amount of repetition in this industry because it's unacceptable. And the growth and innovation in the industry has been very hindered by the fact that we can't really have open source voice over IP applications. We have the PBX, and then we write our own hacks on top of it. So what caveats are there to Adhearsion? Version 0.80 isn't out yet. The previous version, the current version, 0.7x, caught on more than I expected and needs a lot of refactoring. I've begun that refactoring, and 0.80 is that solution. It's also bringing in a lot of things that I've had on the back burner for a while and am now getting a chance to release into the public, such as FreeSwitch integration, which is a really big one, by the way. But the new AND command, which is the Adhearsion command, integrates with the new adhearsion.com, so you can use the integrated Adhearsion utility to pull down these new applications and don't have to go to the website. So, by the way, I hope to have a demo of Adhearsion 0.80 at the Lone Star RubyConf, if anyone's going to that. Another caveat is Asterisk scaling. Because of FreeSwitch's inception, it's now sort of a balancing act of whether you should actually use Asterisk. FreeSwitch scales much, much, much better than Asterisk. Asterisk breaks down at like 120 to 200 calls. So at that point, you have to start clustering and load balancing. And then that imposes issues with actual live phone calls. But people do it, and it's tricky. So fair warning, a good usage case for Asterisk is hackers, right? And people implementing Office PBXs, because an Office typically doesn't have 120 simultaneous calls. With 1,000 people, 100 simultaneous calls is still a lot. So once you start getting those numbers, a FreeSwitch migration wouldn't be too difficult, especially if you use Adhearsion, because it uses the exact same dial point in both of them. So another thing is carrier-grade voice quality is pretty hard. These guys have been working at it for 60 years, and they have it down pretty well. So replicating that is difficult, especially if you're going over the internet to deliver voice and receive voice. And a really expensive way of circumventing this is not to use voice over IP, and rather have the cord coming in your wall plugged directly into your Asterisk box, and then you can place fine phone calls over that. So, but that's very, very expensive, like extremely expensive, like $500 a month for like 17 simultaneous channels. Like it's extremely expensive. And then you have international rates and all that stuff. So don't let that discourage you. VoIP is fun. It really is. It's fun. And you can use Ruby now, and it's a great way to really satiate your own hacker curiosity, like Otto. So thanks. I finished a lot sooner than I expected. I can give a demonstration of adhesion since I have, how much time do I have left? Like 45 minutes. Okay, I'll take questions.
Are you going to put your slides up on your blog?
I can do that, and I'm a little concerned though about the iLife 08 effects and stuff I was using. So I don't think anyone's actually shared iLife 08 presentations and like compatibility issues. And I mean, I could stick the iLife thing up there, and if you have iLife 08, you can view it. Will the transitions and stuff still work? Okay, I'll try it and see what happens. Because really, like on my version of the slides, it's like they're all overlapping and it's illegible. So if it does that, anyway. Yes. So next question.
I read a little bit about people who seemed unhappy with Digium's direction for Asterisk and complications with licensing and GPL libraries and stuff. Should we care?
Well, I'm personal good friends with Mark Spencer, like the creator of Asterisk. I love Digium personally. I don't have any problems with anything that they do other than the fact that they don't want to go back and refactor, but I can kind of understand where they're at because they have so many people using their software. The licensing issue comes up quite a bit. They offer something that they kind of don't talk about very much, but it's a way to license Asterisk exclusively to someone for like, I don't know, $60,000 or something, where they can basically take it and modify it to their own needs. But very few people do that. I guess the only time that would really matter is when you contribute code to it and you would like it to stay in that GPL license, because they have to, I guess, make you sign a waiver to basically the code you contribute to Asterisk becomes Digium's. So it's still open source. It's dual license GPL. So they have a professional version called the Asterisk Business Edition, ABE, and it has a few extra things, and it's actually kind of outdated because they like test everything and to make sure it's not going to actually break. So there are a few proprietary elements of that. Once you start getting into more like hardcore VoIP stuff, like different codecs, a lot of codecs are proprietary as well. So you have to license out the use of a codec. So, I mean, it's kind of hard to escape it, and I think Digium does pretty well. FreeSwitch is MPL, so it's pretty liberal. And if you're really, really hating Asterisk for that reason, go to FreeSwitch. Any more questions?
If I were a hacker enthusiast, which I am, and don't have an office that I was wiring up with PBX, is there a smaller scale? I mean, what would be a good small scale project if I wanted to get into this and learn how to do it? Could you set up a home PBX for example?
Absolutely. Absolutely. A lot of people make really gangster answering machines. That's a popular one. So that's a good one. I mean, you could buy a Digium card. They sell basically the PCI card that plugs into your phone line. So that interfaces with Asterisk, and for every incoming call, do text-to-speech, play, you sound cute, do whatever you want, aggregate your media, call into it, and like listen to RSS feeds, or have really cool caller ID that instant messages you or something.
If you wanted to distribute your calls within your own home or something like that, would you have to get voice over IP phones then? Or is there some way to
Actually, so I hope I don't bury you in jargon. So there's those Digium cards I mentioned. They have two different types of modules in them. They have an FXO and an FXS. An FXO plugs into the wall. An FXS plugs into an analog phone. So if you have, say, like 8 modules, which is kind of an expensive card, because that's a lot, because people usually don't have that many, you would have, say, 7 phones all plugged into that one card, and that other FXO going into your wall. And so in your dial plan, you could address all those other 7 phones with ZAP/extension instead of SIP/extension. ZAP is ZAPFEL, which addresses those analog phones. So yes, you could totally do that.
And you said it's an expensive card.
So
$1,000, $100?
No, it's like $300 or something.
Thank you.
And
Right here.
sorry. So if I had done that, because that was the first part of my question, so I made this really cool answering machine and it addresses phones. Now I want to make a VoIP call from my bedroom. Who can I call? Like, I mean,
Call anyone in the world.
but I mean, what do they have to be? Do they need to be running Asterisk?
Oh no, they can.
Any SIP phone.
So the way that VoIP typically works is you have a trunk, and whenever you make a phone call, it's actually going to a specified host name using SIP, and you, in that session, basically, tell it the destination phone number. So you have Asterisk authenticate with your trunk, and all calls route through it. So it has that big publicly switched telephone network presence, and it places all those phone calls for you. But the trick is, they establish those in like every area code all over the world, or like partner with other people that have them in other parts of the world. So everything's a local call basically because it tunnels with the internet, and it's really cheap, really, really cheap. So you can get like calls to the UK for like $0.01 a minute, or calls within the States for less than $0.01 a minute or $0.01 a minute. So I hope that answers your question. Right here. Mm-hmm.
How hard would it be to take my analog phone in my house, plug into one of these digital cards, and
Use some Gizmo?
Well, I don't know if but replace Gizmo. If somebody's using Gizmo on the other end, a Adhearsion-based system could. It's just SIP, right? So it's still that could connect.
So Gizmo is actually pretty open with their SIP network. So you can configure an Asterisk machine to register with Gizmo, with a given Gizmo username. And you could have an analog phone, say, plugged into an FXS in your Digium card, that all calls route through a dial plan into your trunk, or into Gizmo, basically. And you could effectively dial anyone. Every Gizmo username also has a number. So even on your analog phone, you could dial the 767 number. So, and that's free, totally free. You don't pay for VoIP to VoIP. So a question over here, or up here.
Oh, yeah. Did I misunderstand you, or is the Asterisk book from O'Reilly GPL? Or,
I shouldn't be repeating these questions, I'm sorry. Oh, it's okay, you got it? Okay. The first edition of the book is GPL, and that's the only edition of the book. So if you Google it, you'll find, I think it's kind of buried on the O'Reilly website, but it's definitely GPL, 100% sure.
My question was answered. Thanks.
Okay. Anyone else? Right here.
Any tips on VoIP quality of service and stuff?
So there's a lot of domains to that problem. Like which one in specific?
You talked about carrier grade and how difficult it is to get carrier grade quality. And
So if you control the entire VoIP network, so like if you're Red Hat and you have an Asterisk box, in the closet somewhere that routes all the calls between you, you could use analog, just analog to analog, and it'd be totally fine. You could do VoIP to VoIP. So there are a lot of newer phones, especially, have these HD codecs that sound really great. And if it's going just over LAN, it's going to sound better than any phone, better than cell phones or better than the best connection or best signal on the landline. But if you're going out to, say, like international callees, so like calling, say, India or something, then it goes through several people, and that introduces latency. And if it's going over analog and then back over to digital and then over to analog, it introduces latency. So I don't think it's ever completely unusable. It would never be the case where you couldn't call Mongolia because it was just it sounded so bad. Because there's usually always a good route. It's just achieving that telco quality is hard. If you're on a DSL connection, just uptime aside, I mean that's a problem in itself. That's another thing. Uptime is difficult. But if you're on DSL, you have to do quality of service, where you have to have some kind of switch that actually prioritizes packets. So all VoIP packets over the RTP ports and SIP ports get a higher priority, and therefore other packets wait for them to be delivered. So you get better voice quality that way. Though I mean that introduces costs and complexity, and you have to know, or at least learn a lot about QoS, quality of service. So it's tricky, But for the hackers, they don't deal with that stuff. I mean, you just go out to Gizmo or something, or just any trunk, and it's fine. You're one person, and it's never going to be like, unless you're torrenting all the time, which those have, that can affect VoIP, but otherwise it's usually pretty good. Any more questions? No? Okay. Well, I owe you a demo. I was hoping to do a live demo. Adhearsion 0.80 is going to be in beta soon. Screencasts are going to be awesome for it. That's my demo. I'm sorry. So adhearsion.com, the screencast will definitely be posted there, especially with the new version of Adhearsion and the new version of adhearsion.com. So thanks.